Okay, wanted to take a moment to kind of address part two of federalism, which is federalism and policymaking, and then maybe address a couple other aspects and then move on. So, this is going to be one of our last, we're getting to the end of Unit 1 now. So, one of our last videos that you're going to watch. And we have maybe one, maybe at max most two left. So without further ado, here we go. When we're talking about policy making, please understand that any kind of policy making, the process is a government attempt to solve some sort of social or economic goal. And there's a step-by-step process, which you see here. It's pretty much uniform. At the beginning of this process of policy making, a government attempt to address a social or economic problem, the first thing that always has to be done is what's our problems? And so that is the agenda setting process. Now, when we get to public policy later on in the year, I'm going to go through this multiple times. It'll be part of it, what's going on. So right now, what we're going to talk about, just briefly glance over it. So what's our problems? Okay, create a list. All right, now, if we have our list, we move on to number 2, which is policy formulation, which is brainstorming every single thing you could possibly think of that could be instituted or enacted by government to address that social issue. So what's our problems? Here's possible solutions. Here's all the solutions we can think of. That leads to step 3, which is adoption, which is now let's pick the best solution we possibly can. Out of all the choices that were given to us, we choose to do this one. All right? Once you put it and once you choose, now you have to enforce it. And that's where policy implementation comes in. It's enforcing whatever rule that you've created. All right? What's my problems? Here's all my solutions. I'm choosing this one. Now I'm going to put into practice, and I'm going to enforce it. And then at the very end of the day, you have evaluation, which was, did it work? Did it work? Did it do what it said it would do? Because if it did, then all right, we're good. But if it did not, then let's go right back up to policy formation, and let's go through the process again and figure out different solutions and choosing one. So the reason why it's part of federalism and part of this unit is because in order to be successful in this process, all 3 levels of government have to be involved. All right? Usually the federal government will pass some sort of piece of legislation, and for the most part, it's up to the states and the local politicians or government institutions to get it done. Because whenever we have a problem with our government, I can guarantee you this, you are not going to the top. You are probably seeing somebody at the local or state level that will have to solve your problem for you right there. All right? Now, as far as like who should be in charge of it, federal or state, if you're somebody that argues that the federal government should take the lead on this, then what you're arguing is the argument of more, okay, of more. And what that is, okay, the federal government should be in charge of policymaking, government attempts to address a social or economic problem, because they have more of everything. They have more money, okay, they have more resources, they have more manpower, they have more expertise, if you will, all right, they just have more. Now, if you're arguing on behalf of state control process, what you're arguing is that homegrown approach. And what I mean by that is this. Let's just take the coronavirus, for example, okay? And it could be any problem whatsoever, but we'll just take the coronavirus. And so what the states will argue is this. They'll say, you know who knows the people of Illinois the best? The people of Illinois, okay? So when it comes to whatever issue, we should be in charge of the people within our state because we know what's best for us, okay? We don't need the federal government mandating something that doesn't really cater to the needs of our people. We are very different than what the federal government wants. We should have a unique approach, if you will. And then more importantly, what I will argue time and time again is this, is they're also going to argue that laboratory process, people. They're going to say, listen, if you got a problem like the coronavirus, okay, then you give it to all 50 states. They all come up with their all different plans, and at the end of the day, We're going to pick the best approach. Which one worked the best? Because we're going to pick that one, and that's the one we're going to go with. So, the states can be like laboratories, right? And the one with the best results, that's the one we're going to choose, all right? There we go. Now, as far as what we want to get to today is this idea, and I know I've got it up here, it's right here, is, okay, here is the federalism approach that we've talked about. Here are all your national powers granted by the Constitution, your expressed or enumerated powers. Here's all your reserved powers, your state powers, and then here's the concurrent powers, which are shared. They both have them. So only federal, only state, they both have these ones as well. Now, when it comes to looking at this graph, I think we mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Remember that the state, right here, states love the 10th Amendment. They love the 10th Amendment because virtually what it says is it says if it is not in the Constitution, not mentioned, and there is a lot not mentioned in that Constitution, then it automatically falls to the states. And so all these things not mentioned are going to fall to the states. So they love the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment strengthens them, very much so. But what I want to discuss today is what happens when the federal government wants to intervene over here. What happens when they want to get involved over here? Because right now, they're not allowed to. If you kind of look at this playground, this is our side, this is a shared space between us, but we're not allowed over here. What happens when they try to come over here? All right, so I'm going to take schools. Because I think it's something that's near and dear, and I think it's something that you can understand. If the federal government wants to get involved in schools, there's different ways they can do it. But I will just tell you this right now. The number one way that the government will do, at least at the very beginning, is they will search the Constitution for any kind of power that they have on hand that would allow them to intervene on the state's business. Now, time and time again, the federal government has used the Commerce Clause to do that. All right? The Commerce Clause, according to the United States government, is like an end-all, be-all, catch-all explanation of why they should be able to get involved in anything that they want. Now, I know your mind's probably saying necessary and proper clause, and that's also a good one, and they could definitely use it. It's necessary and proper that we need to come over here and do it. But from time to time, my phone goes off. From time to time, what you're going to see is they're going to use that Commerce Clause. And so what they're going to say is, and it says, Commerce Clause states that the United States Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and with Indian tribes, period. It doesn't seem like a lot. It doesn't feel like a lot. It's a lot, all right? Because what the federal government says and what they have done in the past and continues to do is this. They'll say, you know what? It says here that we get to regulate trade amongst several states, okay? So what that means to us is that that education has a profound impact on the economy because the brighter minds that we turn out of schools impact our economy in a positive or even a negative way if we don't turn out very bright individuals. So therefore, we're in charge of regulating interstate trade, so that allows us to come over here and tell schools exactly what should be going on. And they tried that. They tried to do that with banning guns in schools. And we'll get to that in a day or two with the court case, U.S. versus Lopez, where the federal government says, yeah, the Commerce Clause allows us to tell all schools you got to ban handguns in schools. Nobody thinks that more handguns in schools are a good idea, first and foremost, but does the government have that power? So they're going to try to do that. They're going to try to use the Commerce Clause first and foremost. They will do that, all right? And they did do that. I mean, unsuccessfully. It was not successful for banning the handguns, but it was successful for the 1960s civil rights movement, where the federal government uses the Commerce Clause, and just keep going back to it, to come on in and tell the various different businesses within the state that, all right, you cannot ban African Americans from visiting your places of work. And it worked. So they kind of do that quite a bit. All right, now, moving on. If that doesn't work, if the Commerce Clause doesn't work and they can't justify the necessary and proper clause, then what they're going to do is go to what we would call the carrot and stick approach. All right? Now, we will call that the grant and aid programs. And so here's what I mean by that. When you think grant and aids, and I'm going to post both of these to the website, you need to think of money. Money or commands. Money or commands. So what I'll do is I'll start with federal mandates first, okay? And you can kind of take a look at this. This is what we call the stick. So the carrot is that incentive. It's dangled out in front of you. It's like, come on, here it is. Go, go, go. It leads states to do something the federal government wants because there's a benefit to it. There's an incentive to it. Federal mandates are the stick, which are you will do this or else. Mandates come in two different forms, which it says unfunded or funded. So if it's a funded mandate, it will say, get this done, here's money to do so. But for the most part, the government's really good at saying, get this thing done, get this thing done. And guess what? You're going to pay for it as well, too. And we saw that with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which we'll cover a little bit later moving forward. Now, so once again, if you're thinking of what a mandate is, it's basically the federal government saying, you do this or else. We're telling you, the states, to do this or else. With the Americans of Disabilities Act, you, the state, need to make sure to modify all public buildings so people with disabilities have access to them. If you do not do that, we're going to begin to pull federal funding for local governments or roads. We're going to punish you that way. So do this or else. Stick, 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 stick. All right? And we saw that done with Americans with Disabilities Act, that you will accommodate the disabled, and if you don't, we'll begin to remove funding. And we kind of see that too when they're usually, and I haven't seen it in a long time, but sometimes we see it with the drinking age at 21. Believe it or not, states are in charge of setting that age, okay? They are. And it would be up here one way. If it's not licensing, then it's definitely on there. But anyways, what they'll do, what the federal government will do is say, okay, all right, you chose to take the drinking age from 21 to 18. We think that it is beneficial, and the facts back us up, that 21 is the appropriate age to allow in that behavior. Well, you've done that, so here comes the stick. Now, we can't forcibly tell you to move it back up to 21, but what we'll do is just take away money. Just take away money from you, right? Those highways that you have that we're paying you money for every year, gone, gone. That money that's coming in to help local businesses are gone. That's how they do it. That's the mandate. Now, the carrot approach is an incentive, all right? So it's our categorical grants right here or our block grants. So it's money. It's money. But it is money with a condition to it, if you will. So what the federal government will do, let's say they want to get involved in schools. They'll say, okay, states, hey, states, here's some money for you. Here's some federal money. It's right here for you. It's a program. We've earmarked some money. It's right there for you. And feel free to take it. But if you take the money, then you must also accept our rules. Okay? So once again, here's some money. You don't have to take it. Feel free. Don't worry. You don't need it. But it's right here for you. And now, listen, before you take it, if you do take it, and by all means do so, you have to follow our rules once you take that money. This angers local politicians and governors so much because it pretty much just overwrites their authority. Basically, the federal government is coming in and saying, here's the money. Now, I don't care what your governor said. I don't care what your school board said. I don't care what anybody said. As soon as you accept that money, you follow our rules. And so they use that. They use money to their advantage. And the most popular one is the block grant. Because a block grant is for like undefined purposes sometimes, or like a general broad purpose. And so what, like I say, is imagine we're in art class and I put a block of clay in front of you and I just say, okay, create. And you're like, well, what do you want me to do? Create. Well, wait a minute, create. So I'm giving you a broad idea to create, and you get to figure out exactly what you want to create, how you want to do it, what it's going to look like. All those decisions are left up to you. That's kind of like what you see with the block grants too. It goes into broad ideas like, like healthcare. Now, categorical grants are going to be a little bit different. They're still going to be money, but they're going to have a lot more rules attached to the process. So, that would be like me saying, put a block of clay back in front of you. We're back in art class again, and then say, okay, I want you to create, but you have to follow the following 10 rules. And if you don't, then I'm going to take your block of clay away from you. So it's still money out there. There's still money for you, but listen, you have to obey by a wide set of rules of what we do as well. So that's kind of how they do it. So we're going to kind of stop right there, and then I'll move on a little bit later on. I know that we have to cover the federalism and court cases, which I will do that, talking about the balancing of power and how the Supreme Court decided on that issue too. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to contact me. But until next time, goodbye.